Hey everybody, it's Michael. Welcome back to Let's Explore Unity. This is episode 8. Last couple episodes we have made like a little silly zombie enemy that chases the player and causes some damage when he gets close. Last episode we went and made a little bit of a GUI thing so that it was a little bit more game-like. I'd like to continue expanding that. But I think we need some more fundamentals first. So we're going to go back to a few episodes of trying out some various techniques that we can eventually use to make that zombie thing into something more like a game. Let's see. So first a note, though. The way I was doing this originally was sort of creating all this stuff and then putting it into a folder, and then I was just duplicating that folder for the next example as we went along. It turns out that is not a good way to do things in Unity, and I apologize for leading you guys down that path. If you've been doing that, you've probably run into a few problems, and unfortunately, so a lot of times when you do that, first of all, there's the namespace conflict, right? Because you're duplicating scripts, and Unity says, hey, I got two of these things called whatever class, right? And so that's why I wrapped them in a namespace. And I thought, well, that'll take care of everything. Turns out it really doesn't take care of everything. A lot of times the scripts that are already hanging on objects get broken, and you have to remove them and drag new ones on. It's kind of a pain in the butt. So apparently Unity doesn't handle that very elegantly. So we're not going to do that anymore. I'm going to start here with a new scene, and we're just going to build it up from the ground. At some point, we're just going to, I think what we'll do is probably just keep building on this one. And then when we get ready to build something that's a little more game-like, maybe we'll start that from scratch too. So it's a brand new scene in Unity. I'm going to save the scene here. Let's do save scene. I'm just going to call it main. And then in this scene here, let's build, I'm just going to put a game object in. And I'm going to call it world. And under world, I'm going to do what we had before, a 3D object, a plane maybe. Let's scale that up to say 10 by 10. Okay, so we got this little guy here. What I want to talk about this time is the concept of spawn points. These would be, a location in the world where your game might decide to spawn an enemy or a player, for instance, if you had an FPS and you wanted to have different spawn points where people could appear. So the game will maintain a list of spawn points, and at some interval or for some condition should arise, it will spawn a creature there, and then that creature will do something, and will spawn one of our prefabs that we create. So let's create a prefab, and I'm just going to create a pretty simple little prefab here. I'm going to make a game object, and under that game object, I'm going to put a capsule, and I'm going to move him up so he's on the world there, and let's just call this our enemy. And we're going to prefab that enemy, but let's do some things to him first. Let's put a script on him. So I'm going to make a C# script called enemy. I feel like that's not spelled correctly, but I think it is. Okay, I'm going to drag that onto our enemy, and then let's prefab him. And then we can delete that now that it's prefabbed. Okay, and we're not going to get fancy with any script materials or anything like that. I'm going to create a C# script called Game Manager, MGR. By the way, don't ever type out Game Manager because that's a different thing. You're going to conflict with some Unity namespace stuff when you do something called Manager. Same thing with like Input Manager. Those are already things in Unity, and maybe that's why everybody uses the term controller. I don't know. All right. I'm going to create a thing. I'm just going to call it Managers, if I can spell that right, and I'm going to drag our game manager onto that. And then I'm going to open up both of these things. So in order to have a spawn point, we need to be able to tell our game where is this point. We could do that with an XML file with a list of locations in it, or we could just write them into code and say, okay, location 1 is here, location 2 is here. But we've got this nifty editor. So what we'd like to be able to do is just do it in the editor, right? I think it would be cool for your level designer, right, to be able to use this editor and not have to know anything about code and just go, okay, I know, I can put this thing here and it'll be a spawn point, and I can tell the game about it, and then it'll just be instantly integrated into the thing. So let's work towards something like that. I'm going to open up these scripts in MonoDevelop. I'm going to get rid of their little line ending complaint here. I kind of wish it would default to Windows line endings since I'm on a Windows machine. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can actually see what's going on with the scripts over here. And then in Game Manager. So Game Manager is going to want to know about our prefab. So let's give it a public game object called enemy prefab. Okay, so that by making that public, we're going to expose this in the inspector, and we don't have to do anything except go back to, I'm going to save it, go back over here to our, and why do I have two unities open? I don't know. Let me close one of them. Go back to our scene over here. Click on our managers, and now notice we have a room for a prefab, so let's drag our prefab in. So now we've got a prefab. We need to be able to get some position data somehow from some item that's put into the editor. So let's do that. We'd like to have more than one probably eventually, but let's just, for now, let's just do one public game object, and we'll call it spawn point. Now I'm asking for a game object, but we could just ask for a transform because that's really all we need. So let's take a look at this. If I type in transform, big T, transform, this is now asking for, in the inspector over there, it's going to say, have a little slot for us to drag in a transform. And it's going to be referred to in this script as our spawn point. So let me save that and come over here. Now we've got a spawn point. It wants an item of type transform. Well, okay, what happens if we, by the way, so notice when I click on plane, it goes away. If I click this little lock icon up here, it'll kind of keep this open for me, and then I can click on other things and it won't close. So I could drag this plane over here and notice what it does. So a plane is a game object, right? But it has a transform on it. So when you're asking for a specific type of component, a transform or just about anything, rigid body or whatever kind of component that you want to get access to, you can drag the game object in and it'll go ahead and say, all right, well, I'm only going to take the transform from that thing, but I don't actually want the transform. So let's, how do we make this go away? Can I select none? Yeah, there we go. We can make it be none that way. So let's think about, how would we do a spawn point? And honestly, I think the easiest way probably is to, oops, I've still got that locked, by the way, so unlock it so that you can select new things. I'm going to take this empty game object here and I'm going to call it spawn points. And then under spawn points, I'm just going to create another empty game object, and let's just call this spawn 1. So you'll notice that spawn 1, it's an empty game object, and even an empty game object comes with a transform, which is really all we need, right, for a spawn point. We need a position and possibly a rotation if we wanted to say, okay, take on the rotation of this spawn point. But I don't think we need to do that. So now if I click on this guy in the editor over here, we have, you know, a little transform arrow thing, and we can move this guy around. So let's just put him over here. He's over here at -5, -5-ish, right? So there he is. But when we click off of him, you can't see it, which is a bit of a problem that we'll talk about in a little bit. I'm going to save my scene, and then I'm going to pop back over here. So now we know about a spawn point. Actually, did I drag it on? I don't think I did. Let's make sure that I drag it on. I'm going to lock that. I'm going to drag spawn point 1 onto there, and then I'm going to unlock it. So now we've got this transform. So this transform, if we looked at it, would have the same data that this does. It would be -5.1 in the x. Let's make that just -5, and let's make it just -5 in the z, so that we can just, it'll just be nice and clean that way. All right, so now we've got access to it back in our script. So there we go. So if we wanted to, all we would have to do is, we can do it in start here, would seem like a good place. So we have access to a prefab, and we have access to a point at which we'd like to spawn that prefab. So we could very easily just say something like instantiate, right? And then choose one of these instantiate versions. Just take an easy one. So we'll take the enemy prefab as the original thing we're passing in. And then it wants a parent, but we can go down here and find one that, okay, this one wants the original, the vector 3 position, and a quaternion specifying the rotation. Well, like I said, we have a position right here. Or actually, we have a transform. So if we say spawn point dot transform, spawn point is a transform, and we can get its position by typing position. And then I'm just going to give it quaternion dot identity. Quaternion.identity. Now, I might have said earlier that quaternion.identity gives you, I'm not sure exactly what I said. If you do this, it basically imparts no rotation. If we want to give it a specific rotation, we'd have to get more into how exactly these guys work. So we're getting an enemy prefab dragged in the editor. That's going to give us a link to it. And then we're getting a spawn point, which is a transform that's dragged in the editor. So that's going to give us a transform here in star. We're instantiating a game object using that enemy prefab as our blueprint. We're putting it at the position of the spawn point, and we're not giving it any rotation. So let's save all. Go back over here to the game screen and press play if we get no errors, and we don't. And there we go. Our camera is kind of in a funky spot. Let's take our camera and, well, I don't know. Let's just move it back a little bit. Yeah, I think maybe what we need to do is rotate it down a little bit. A little bit hard without any terrain on the map to see what's going on. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the main camera and I'm going to copy this component. And then I'm going to end the game. And then I'm going to go back to camera and I'm going to paste component values. And that'll put our camera where it was so that when we go back in here, now we can see. Okay, so we got our guy spawning there. That's great. He doesn't do anything, but he spawns at our spawn point. Now, I think a big problem is, though, is we can't really see our spawn point. Let me duplicate this one, and I'm going to drag it over here. Actually, I'm just going to type in that we want it at -5 and 5. So now we have two spawn points in the scene, but we cannot see them, and this could be a problem for your, for your level editor guy, or you, if that's you. And so, Unity has something to help us out, though, with that. Something called gizmos. And you see gizmos when we click on an item, right? That's a gizmo right there. But it doesn't get drawn if you don't have the item selected. Unity has a very nice little function called onDrawGizmos. And what that is kind of like start, it's kind of like update. It's just a function when Unity gets ready to draw gizmos in the editor window, it says, hey, does anybody have any gizmos to draw? And in this case, we're going to say, why, yes, we do have some to draw. So onDrawGizmos, if we put in this function right here, I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to go back over to this and hope that it pastes in, but if not, we can type it. Yeah, there we go. Void onDrawGizmos. And let's go ahead and think about what we would do here. What we'd like to do is onDrawGizmos, we'd like to go through however many spawn points we have and draw something, right? So let's try that. Right now we only have one spawn point, so it's kind of easy. What we can do is, I think there's even an example right here. Yeah, gizmos.drawSphere. We can draw a lot of different things, but draw sphere seems like a reasonable thing to do. Here's a list of things you can draw. All kinds of stuff, wire cube, wire mesh, wire sphere. Maybe wire sphere. Let's try that. Rather than a solid sphere. So I'm just going to paste that in, and then let's think about it. Maybe not color white, maybe color green. Yeah, green, that'll be good. You can define your own colors, but these are already defined for us, so we can use that. And then we got transform.position. Well, that's not what we want, because that's the transform of the thing that we're attached to. What we want is the spawn point.position. Spawn point.position. And let's just make the radius like 0.5 or something like that. I think maybe that'll work, 0.5. And let's go try it out and see. Okay, there we go. There he is right over there. So now we can see that spawn point, and we have another spawn point, but we haven't assigned it. But when we do, we'll be able to see that one as well. So let's go make it so that we can have multiple spawn points. So instead of a public transform, let's get a public array of transforms. Okay, so there we go. For this, I'm going to say spawn point, just to make it work again, I'm going to put in 0 there, our first element in our array. And over here, let's do a little loop. So I'm going to say for I equals 0 to I less than, and what we want to do for our maximum point here is to say spawn point dot length. Length is the value of It's just how many elements are in our array. And then what we'll do here is just give this an array index of I, not of if, of I. Thank you. Can you, oh, because it's not in the loop. It's not in the loop, so it doesn't want me to do that. So we can put it in the loop. There we go. So we're going to go, however many spawn points are in our array, we're gonna tick through them, and we're going to draw a little sphere, a little gizmo sphere at that position. So let's save this and go back over to our editor window. And actually, I'm going to take these spawn points and I'm going to duplicate them, and I'm going to move them to, let's say, 5 in the X direction. There we go. So now we got all those guys, but we need to give them to our list of spawn points. Now this is an array, not just a single item. So if we lock this over here, I can grab all these spawn points and I can drag them in to this thing, and now you can see that they're all there. I'm going to rename them though, and I don't know why. It doesn't have to be done, but I like to keep this thing clean, so I'm going to name that spawn 2. Going to name that spawn 3. You got to hit return after you do that, or enter. And I'm going to rename that one spawn 4. There we go. And you can see that they're all showing up because on draw gizmos, we are drawing a little gizmo. When we run the game, our little zombie shows up over there. Our little zombie, he doesn't do anything though. I still can't see Jack over here. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take this camera. I'm going to reset its transform to 0. I'm going to move it up a little bit. And then I'm going to change it to orthographic. Orthographic, I mean, you know what perspective is. That's how you see the world. Orthographic is as if you took everything and projected it directly onto just a piece of glass that's in front of you. You don't get any perspective that way. You just get, well, you can see. If we look at the camera here, you can see that it's a box. Actually, it's a little hard to see that it's a box because our plane is very bright. So here I am making materials, like I said we weren't going to do. But I want to make this plane a lot darker so that we can see these gizmos and stuff. Let's drag that onto our plane so that now it's a little bit darker. And in fact, I am going to create an enemy material. There I go. All right. Just accept it. We're going to make him green-ish, yellow, greenish, maybe. Because zombies. Unfortunately, I have to get this guy open here. You can do this down here in the asset window, but you got to lock it and do lots of different things. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to drag that material on. Except I don't think it did. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to apply. Did you change it? You did? Now I'm going to delete that enemy back out. Okay, let's try this again. Well, our camera's not looking at the right spot. So what I want to do with the camera is looking in the the direction of the blue arrow. Notice now it's a big box, right? What I want to do is I just want to rotate it. Is it 90 degrees that way? Yeah, there we go. So now we're looking straight down at our scene. We can't see anything right now because there's nothing to see, right? There's nothing being rendered. If we were to let's drag our enemy in and go back and select the camera. Now you can see we got the enemy right there. Let's make this guy, this camera be size. What happens if we make it a 10? Yeah, there we go. So now we're zoomed out pretty far. Get rid of our enemy. Let's play and see what happens. So here's our guy. He got instantiated over there. All right, now let's make that guy do something real quick here. Let's go to our enemy script. And I think on update, what we'll do is we will turn towards. So we're going to get this guy's transform. It'll be transform dot look at, and then we'll give it a point to look at. So let's have it look at a new vector 3. We got to give it a target. Actually, what are our options here? Can we just give it an X, Y, and Z? Yeah, apparently not. So we got to give it a target. Let's give it a instead of a target, let's give it a vector 3. So we're going to say new vector 3, and I'm going to say 0, and I'm going to say 1 in the y, because that's in the middle of where this guy's looking. If we told it to look at 0, 0, 0, it would look kind of point the whole thing down. So I'm just going to have it look straight ahead, and that's what this 1 is doing. He's looking 1 unit up from the ground. So we're turning him to look at that, and then we're going to transform, get the transform again, and we're going to use the translate function. And we're going to translate it along its forward vector. So we'll say v3 to get our little vector shortcut there. v3.forward. And then let's do a little bit of speed here. We'll give him a speed, and we'll multiply it by time dot delta time. Okay, so that's going to move him forward at speed. He doesn't have a speed right now, so let's give him 1. So float speed equals, let's just say 5. And I'll go ahead and do that. So we're giving him a speed. We're saying, okay, when you update, turn to look at the center of the world, but a little bit up from the ground. And then we want you to translate yourself over there based on your speed and how much time has passed since the last frame. So let's save this. Going to end up with a whole bunch of game objects in our world if we keep spawning these guys, but it's not that big a deal. So there he goes. And actually it looks to me like maybe he looked up into the air a little bit, because he does seem to be floating. No big deal. I don't care. Let's make him go away once he gets to the center. So how about if, let's get his distance to the center. Actually, we can do it here in this. If vector 3 dot magnitude. All right, what magnitude is just the length of a vector. So we're going to subtract this guy's position, transform dot position, and a new vector 3 that is the center of the world. And actually here, let's do this. Sorry, I hope this isn't getting very confusing. We're going to declare back here a new vector 3 called world center. Right? And we're going to say that is equal to a new vector 3 like that. And then here, we're just going to say world center. And then here, we're going to say world center. Okay, this doesn't seem to be working. Vector 3 world center equals new vector 3 0 1 1 0. Transform look at world center. We've got too many parentheses there. That would be the problem, I believe. Now, what we want to say, if this thing, if transform.position minus world center, the magnitude of that is less than, say, 0.5, then we want to, magnitude is going to return us a floating point number, right? It's going to take these three XYZ coordinates, XYZ, do the subtraction, and then figure out the distance for us. And it's going to give us a float. And what have I got? I've got a parenthesis out of place here, and another one there, right? Are you good now? I feel like this should be good, but I don't know what's going on with this. But let's keep going and see if it works itself out. So what we're going to do is we're going to destroy this game object, if this is the case. And we can say that by using this. Destroy this. We will destroy this item. There's definitely a problem here. Let me see if I can figure it out. I've got too many parentheses or not enough parentheses or something. There we go. Not enough parentheses. So let's save this and see if it actually works. We're just going to make that game object go away. It doesn't like that. Operator less than cannot be applied to operands of type Unity Engine Vector 3 and float. All right, let me think about this. It's because of where my parentheses are, because I'm being a derp. So we want to get this transform minus world center, transform.position minus world center, and get the magnitude of that, and then compare that magnitude, which is a floating point number, to this floating point number. That should resolve that problem. Yep, that goes away. So let's try this. Do we get it? Yep, we do. He gets to the center, but he doesn't get destroyed for some reason. Now, why is that? Let's make it, let's just say less than 1. See what happens. Will you get destroyed if we say 1? It doesn't. I don't know. Yeah, okay, I got it worked out. All I have to do is play with things for a little while. This, if we just destroy this, we're only destroying this class, right? Our enemy class. We have to get this dot game object. We have to get the game object this is attached to. So that's what I was doing wrong there. So now if we come back and play, our little guy will go towards the center and then he'll disappear. So what we could do now is set up just a little loop where we spawn these guys just in an ongoing way over here in Game Manager. So let's do that. Instead of instantiating one at start, let's instantiate one in update. And we'll only do it, we'll work out a little bit of a timing mechanism. Actually, you know what, we won't. We'll just spawn one every update. So instead of, though, picking 0 as our index, so let's get an index randomly. So what we'll say is this, an integer, we're going to declare an integer called point index or spawn index, and we'll say that integer is equal to random.range, which remember will turn us a number between the minimum we give it, which will give it 0, and the maximum we give it. And what we can do is we can use the spawn point.length to get the maximum. So spawn point.length. Alright, so that's going to return us a random integer between 0 and spawn point length into spawn index. And then we can instantiate the enemy prefab at spawn point at the index position of spawn index, get its position, and we'll spawn a thing. So every single frame, and this could be a lot of dudes, we're going to be spawning a guy. And they're going to be heading towards the center, but then they're going to be destroying themselves. So that's kind of good. We're cleaning up as we go along a little bit here. Let's see. It could get a little nutty. Yeah, it gets a little nutty. We got a lot of enemy clones going there. But they're spawning and they're heading towards the center. This video went a little long, but next time around, I think what we'll look at is the idea of being able to spawn like multiple guys and picking from spawn points so that we don't end up with, you know, like 2 guys in the same spot, right? So we'll kind of, as we're spawning, we'll say, okay, this one has already been used in this last second or so. So we're going to pick a different one, right? So we'll work on that next time around. We'll keep playing with spawn points for one more episode. And then we'll play with some other of Unity's features, probably physics. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for joining me for Let's Explore Unity. Bye.